everyone. Welcome to TSP Weekly. This is your tech startup podcast for Monday, March the 2nd, 2015. And today we are recording at the Velocity Foundry.
Yes, in the furnace room.
The furnace room of the Foundry. Not as hot as I would expect it to be in the furnace room of the Foundry, but nice nonetheless.
We're about to stoke the flames, so.
There we go. Perfect. We have, before we introduce our guests, typically we introduce ourselves. Let me do that first. My name is Darren Conley. I'm a local tech entrepreneur here in Kitchener-Waterloo. Joining me is my wonderful co-host, fellow tech entrepreneur, Stephen Campbell. How are you today, Stephen?
I am feeling wonderful. Thanks for noticing.
Yeah,
and
good.
I'm really excited. March 16th coming up at Conestoga College is the Conestoga College Pitch Day.
Right.
So up to 25 students in teams of 4 or less are going to be pitching. Up to $10,000 is going to be awarded for prizes. And one of the dragons from Dragon's Den is going to be one of the judges.
Oh, which
so
one?
I'm really excited. Michael Weckerly?
Oh, yeah.
I think
Michael.
I'm pronouncing that
good old Mike.
correctly.
Yeah.
So, and as you know, we're going to be interviewing the winners of the pitch day.
Yes.
So they will be appearing on TSP Weekly.
That's a real incentive for them to win.
Absolutely.
They get to be on our podcast.
Yep, I think it's the only reason they're really pitching.
Yeah,
is
sure.
to be on the podcast.
Is there money involved for the winners too?
Yeah, up to 10 grand.
Up to 10 grand.
Yeah.
So it could be like $1. It could be $10,000.
Yeah, you could win 10 stacks.
Wow, excellent.
So yeah, so stay tuned here. We're going to have more information about it next week.
We could use 10,000 for the podcast.
Yeah, I don't think we'll win that.
No,
but
we can't
we would
pitch?
have to pitch, I think.
Man,
But we
see if
could.
we can weasel something.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, well, let's introduce our guests here. Today, joining us, we have Mr. Bjorn Dawson and Stefanie Chan from Grobo. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thank you for having us on. It's pretty exciting. Our first podcast.
First
Dun, dun, dun.
podcast.
Yeah.
We're happy to be the first in what I'm sure will be a long line of podcast appearances,
Hopefully.
potentially.
That's the plan.
Excellent.
I hope you guys studied all weekend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're going to be grueling.
yeah, and grilling. We're gonna grill you,
Yes.
grueling fashion.
Do you have grilled
Yeah.
pea shoots? That does sound good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's dive right in here, guys. So first of all, Grobo, like typically, well, not typically, but often we can figure out something about what the startup does by the name. Grobo, I'm assuming, has something to do with growing stuff.
Yeah. There's kind of another
Yeah.
word hidden in there too, which is robo.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
we actually automate the entire growing process.
Excellent.
And what we're doing is we're actually creating an automated or a smart garden for consumer use. So something you could fit on a window ledge, you could fit on your kitchen counter. You tell our system what you've planted, and it really takes care of the rest for you. So it waters your plants, provides them with light, monitors temperature, humidity, reads all that data out onto an app. So it's really the connected garden. That's what
Awesome.
we're going for.
I love that, the smart garden.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
it is.
So
neat.
this is sort of a software and hardware mix then?
Definitely. Internet of Things. I guess that's one of our biggest challenges, but it's the coolest part. Is with software, we can make things really, really easy for gardeners. We, even at the office, we'll kill things because we forget to water, and that's what we're trying to fix, right? So unless it's our system running it, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to keep all your plants alive and know how each one needs to be treated.
Sure.
So if we could just back up real quick, what is the Internet
Yeah.
of Things for our listeners? Is that like I get to talk to my fridge now or my toaster?
Yeah, 100%. So the Internet of Things is everything in your house, and not even limited to your house, but everything being connected to the internet. And so there's so many more devices that are being connected that we can control from our phones. So you can control locks. The Nest thermostat is an example. Refrigerators can tell you grocery lists. And so it's really everything getting connected. I've seen a connected toaster at a hackathon. I thought
Right.
that was an interesting
That
one.
would be cool.
I need to remotely know if my toast is finished, right? I guess you can tell you if you're in another room.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure why they went that route.
Yeah.
But I've even seen another group that did an interesting idea. They never commercialized it, but it was a pot that had an extension. It was an add-on on top, and
Yeah.
you could put different ingredients in different compartments and then remotely start the cooking cycle. And so the pot would heat up, and then it would start cooking spaghetti or whatever you wanted, so it was ready by the time you got home.
Like a smart
Interesting.
stove.
Yeah.
Smart stove. Yeah, I think it's a little bit dangerous and scary, perhaps.
Sure.
That you're going to turn on a stove when you're away, but still, so that's where it's going, right? Is everything
Yeah.
gets connected, and then eventually, it's just starting, but everything can talk to, all the devices can talk to each other. So Nest has the ability to integrate with other products now. But if we integrated with them, for example, if your plants were getting cold, your thermostat could automatically warm up.
Right. Yep.
And so that's where it gets really interesting, is when your house can
When
react.
your smart garden talks to your smart house.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
suddenly you feel yourself really sweating. You're like, man, why is it so hot in here? Oh, the plants need it warmer.
Well, that's it. So it might not be the most effective solution.
but it's
Yeah,
interesting.
and then you just
how it could work.
prioritize that you come before plants.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. Now, I'm assuming then the box, or it's a box shaped piece of hardware. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a
Okay.
few things. Actually, and even
Yeah.
the Grobo name was initially from Grow Box. It had nothing to do with robot. That was a happy coincidence.
Okay.
I took the X
Interesting.
off.
Yep.
So it's a series of cubes. So they're 8 inches by 8 inches, a little bit larger than a box of tissue paper, for example. And
Okay.
then you connect them together. So one of them has a water reservoir, and then you can connect up to 6 other ones that all contain soil, and they're what we call grow pods. And so that's where you'll plant your seeds, and then those are the sections that get watered. And then we also have specialized grow LED lighting systems that just click into the side. So
Okay.
the whole thing is modular so that it fits your budget.
Yep.
We see a lot of people in apartments who don't have any space to grow anything.
Right.
And they want a system like this just so that they can fit it into that corner that they have available, right? Or onto that shelf. That might be long enough to accommodate all 6 pods, or maybe they get 2 or 3 and they're happy with that.
That's a really good idea. I see a lot of synergy. We just saw the guys from Pallet Gear, who we had on previously, and they're modular too, right?
Yeah.
So do you have any synergy with another team that works so closely with you, that's doing sort of very similar modular, maybe not the hardware, but the development of the marketing strategy, or some of those sort of brainstorming sessions or anything? Or do you more keep to yourself?
I guess that's the beauty of the Velocity Foundry, is you don't have to keep to yourself. The pallet guys are great. They work about 10 feet away from our desks,
Yep.
which is really nice to have, and they've been really supportive. So when we have ideas about how we can do data exchange, when you have modular systems, there's addressing that goes into it. It could become a pretty complex process.
Right.
We figured out our plan, and then we went to them and said, hey, like, we know you guys have investigated this. Does this make sense?
Right.
Right. And you can talk it through, and they're willing to do it because we're not at all in the same space.
Right.
But they're just that little bit ahead of us that they can help out. So definitely we talk to them, even for marketing. Steph and Ryan, their marketing guy, they get along, and some other companies in the space here too.
Yep.
I mean, everybody's pretty open to helping each other out, I would say.
That's awesome. So they're almost like
That
a
is good.
mentor for you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're getting a Christmas card this year.
Yeah.
Next Christmas, it's a little ways
yeah.
away, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe more of a resource than a mentor.
Sure.
So everybody's so busy that you don't always go to them. But
Right.
when there's that one question and you're like, I know this person that can probably answer this question,
Yep.
you go to them.
Sure.
Anybody in, I would even say that, like, the KW ecosystem
Yeah.
has been super friendly and very, very helpful, not just in Velocity. Really, it's anybody. Conrad, Launchpad.
Sure.
Everyone's been good.
So I'll stop asking questions, because I know Darren's dying to get
Well,
to
I have a question. I had a
get to
question
your,
or two I wanted to ask about the product actually too. Like, so you said there was some LEDs involved. How do the LEDs work with your product?
So what scientists, through all kinds of experiments, have figured out is that plants respond differently to different wavelengths, and they're very specific wavelengths. So if we hit a plant with a specific blue, it'll have a certain reaction. If we hit it with red, it has another reaction. And so what we've done is we've looked at that research, and we figured out, okay, these are the wavelengths and the proportions of wavelengths that we want in order to encourage quick growth, healthy growth, so that you have really broad leaves.
Right.
And then it's always, I guess, it's an interesting thing. It's always a trade-off. So an interesting point that we're fighting with right now is for lighting, you only really need different shades of red and blue. Because plants are green, they reflect all the green light that we shoot at them.
Right.
Right? So green is technically wasted.
Right.
So if we use any white light that has green in it, it's not the most efficient solution. And as a company going towards a more sustainable solution, that means that we're going with red and blue lights. but maybe it doesn't look so great in your home as a designer product, right?
So there's the trade-off between the aesthetic factor and the how it's going to affect the plant's growth factor, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so you're not going to hurt the plants too much if you do white light, any like regular lights. There are specific grow lights, but an incandescent can do something to help plants grow.
Sure.
But yeah, so we want to use the LED lights because they're really targeted at the properties we want.
Sure.
We can also run them up to like, it's a pretty ridiculous number. You can do up to like 18 hours a day.
Wow.
Up to, there's a factory in Japan, I think they're hitting like 21 hours a day of lighting constantly on, and then 3 hours at night that are totally dark, where the factory is lit with green lights because the plants don't see it.
So they can work.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Are you gonna? Did you ever look at CFLs at all, or?
We did. It's one of those things, like the cost up front for LEDs, yes, it's a little bit higher,
Right.
but they're not really going to burn out on you, and we can control them much better.
Yeah.
They're not hazardous if they break.
No, not at all.
Well, and you don't want to have customers asking for replacement lights on their product, right? That's a
Or
pretty big
maybe
deal.
you do.
Well,
Because
I don't
that's how you give away the printer and sell the ink, right?
Nah, keep the people happy is better, I think. Well,
Well,
it's just me.
we kind of do that, though. We've got seeds and soil for ink, right?
Yeah,
Right.
see, there you go.
Yeah.
And so that's how we can.
So is that your monetization strategy to keep them coming back after they've invested in the actual hardware?
Yeah, exactly. So seeds, soil. We're looking at potentially having a paid version of our app with more data. So if you're using this, we've actually heard people that would want this in labs so they can grow plants for science experiments without
Sure.
paying attention to growing the plants.
Yeah.
So they might want more data and history on temperature and stuff like that.
Do you have any competition for a growing app out there?
There's only one at this point. They launched on Kickstarter a year ago now.
June 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
They
Not
haven't
quite a
shipped
year
yet,
ago.
though. Yeah,
Okay.
not quite a year ago.
Yeah.
But they haven't shipped yet. So we really, they had some success. It's a much larger system.
Right.
Sure.
Is that the
but
one out
we're
of
not sure.
England?
These guys are.
They're from Estonia or Northern Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
They
done some
travel
research
around
and
a
I'd
little
seen
bit.
something over there. Very expensive to ship. Weren't
Right.
even shipping to Canada or the U.S. yet. They were talking about Brazil
Yeah.
and Europe and...
Right.
For sure. And this company's moved around a little bit too, right? So
Okay.
of course they've got the standard hub in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
In somebody's office space. They've been out in China. So
But having another group on Kickstarter at least can provide you with some validation data to see if people are interested in this type of thing, right? Like that's important to know before you put yourselves out there and spend all,
your heart
all
and
kinds
soul
of money,
into...
right?
Yeah.
I would hope,
absolutely.
yeah.
So who is your target market then? Are you going for obviously homeowners or students or...
Apartment people who don't have
Apartment,
backyards.
yeah, what's the-
Yeah, so that's the basic gist of it. We're looking to target people who live in the city or who live in colder climates who don't have the climate conditions or the space to grow large gardens, and people who are always busy, people who live busy lifestyles, who don't have time to invest into learning how to grow and to watching their plants and taking care of them all the time.
That makes sense.
And you're really growing food, right? You're not growing sort of plants to look at. Or I
Well,
guess
you
you
could,
could.
though.
or
Well, you
what's the-
could. You definitely could. I mean, we're looking mainly towards food, but if anyone wants to grow flowers or any potting plants, they're definitely welcome to that as well.
Sure.
Okay.
You know, my wife does a lot of green. What do you call it? There's like a niche that the green smoothie juicers, fermenting crowd, and all those.
Yeah.
But she
Sure.
also is into for a while like sprouting. So people who sprout their beans or sprout their wheat and things like this. In order to extract more nutrition. So I wonder if something like this could work too for kind of those niche markets like the sprouting crowd that want to, do a little bit of plant growth in their own homes for the sake of their own, experimentation and stuff too, right?
Well, that's totally part of it, right? This is more than a gardening product. So it all started because in the summer I garden. I've grown some really cool things. I grew a couple watermelons last year, and I have a pretty small garden. So it's amazing what you can get. But it tastes so much better. The tomatoes have more meat. I had a basil plant. It was about 4 feet tall, and I needed one basil leaf if I was making a tomato basil sandwich. That's how big the leaves were.
Wow.
But
That's great.
I gave it the time to grow. Things happened properly, and it wasn't exposed to pesticides and everything else. And so what we're seeing is people are more and more concerned with the food that we eat and what's available to us. And that's why they're starting to go this route. So the sprouting, 100%, they would be interested, because that's a great use for the system.
Sure. Now, I'm glad you brought up why you started it, because that was where I wanted to go next, was kind of find out how Grobo started.
We almost called ourselves that too.
Yeah.
And I was calling it that for a while until Chris corrected me.
ways,
He's like, there's no R.
Fair enough. But to find out what was the genesis of this, and how did you kind of go from just being an idea in your head like this would be cool to kind of make, to where you guys are today? So let's go back to the beginning then. So did it start with you in your garden in the back? And
it was a cold, rainy day.
Yeah.
No?
Actually, it was a really nice sunny day,
perfect.
and I had a lot of success getting literally like buckets of tomatoes. So I didn't realize how much a tomato plant could produce, and I planted 12 of them or something. I like tomatoes, but I didn't know. And so I literally had buckets of tomatoes, and they tasted so much better. The cucumber tasted so much better. So I thought, okay, I'd love to do this inside. I tried to find something that would allow me to do it inside, and I really couldn't find anything that I liked. The reviews for most things were pretty bad, just because you still need to take time, right? Outdoors, I definitely forget to water my plants, but Mother Nature takes care of that for me half the time, 3/4 of the time when I miss.
Yeah.
And so we tried to go inside. Then I actually went, and the first Grobo system, it's silly now, but it was 2 feet by 4 feet. It was literally a small indoor greenhouse.
Okay. Wow.
I put it together, built it out of wood, put some of the sheets that you use when you're painting that you put on the floor.
Right.
I used those to try to build the walls, keep the heat in, whatever. Had that in my living room for about 3 months. Couldn't grow a whole lot of anything. It started to smell and attract bugs because of how big it was.
Yeah.
I overwatered it, so it was flooded. It didn't go well, and it was huge, and I was really fed up.
Yeah.
But the idea was still there. I still wanted something that could be large enough that I could grow a decent sized garden, but it didn't have to be that 2 feet by 4 feet, because I realized nobody's going to put this in their home. I have it in my home, and I hate it. So it's not going to work. And that's where we ended up going with the idea. And I remember it was just one morning. I don't even know what I was doing, but all of a sudden it clicked, and it was like, okay, modular.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it had something to do with palette. I don't know. I don't think I had seen their stuff yet.
Right.
Sure.
But it was one of those things let's build this so people can customize it, so that they can really make it fit their life.
Right.
Because in my house, I've got a nice bay window that would work. And so I said, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
What size do we want? I took paper and I cut out and I made these paper boxes that would be about the size that I thought would be good. And then I put a bunch of them in the windowsill, and then I just left them there for 2 weeks.
Right.
And realized, okay, I would be just fine with something that size in the windowsill, and I can fit about 5 of our pods in there.
Okay.
And that's when the idea really started. And it was okay, so now what can we do? Well, we can make gardening easier if we connect it to the internet, which is becoming an easier thing to do. Still quite difficult.
Yeah.
But we can make it easier, and that's really when the idea started to take shape. And then I started talking to other people, and eventually got my co-founder Chris on board, and he's an electrical and computer engineer, so he had more of the electronic side and was able to execute on that better than I could.
And just a side note, because Chris isn't here, when I met him, he had bright green hair.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
No gamma ray accident or something?
I don't know. I didn't ask him about it. We didn't talk about it, but it was
He normally has that.
Yeah, fair enough.
a
He had
good marketing tactic.
bright pink hair recently. Oh, he's great. If you go to an event with Chris,
Yeah.
you never lose him.
Awesome.
Really easy
Yeah.
to spot. And people are like, oh, you have a co-founder. Yeah, he's right over there. Look for the green hair or pink hair or whatever he's got.
Yep. Can we get a logo up there?
We could try.
Yeah, hair logo.
And so you mentioned Chris's background. What about your own background, apart from gardening?
Mechanical engineering is my
gotcha.
background.
Gotcha.
But really, my passion has always been business anyways.
Gotcha.
So I wanted the tech knowledge from mechanical engineering, but everybody in my family is an entrepreneur
Cool.
and has been for a while. And so that's where I grew up around businesses, right? And
Yep.
you see the struggles, but then you see the successes. And it's just something I always knew I wanted to get into. And then I I got into it. I started 2 businesses previously that weren't as great. Managed to sell them. I haven't had a loss yet for a business, but
that's a success.
That's better than most other businesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that your unfair advantage then? That nest of entrepreneurs that you're able to bounce stuff off of and support group?
Not from any previous ones, no. That's all been built up here. I mean, so my first one was just going, I didn't want to get a summer job with anybody because I wanted to enjoy my summer when I could, right?
Yeah.
And have some of the ability. I was younger at the time, maybe like 13, 14.
Sure.
Have some ability to take time when I wanted and enjoy it. I was in the final years of high school. So I bought a bunch of stuff to do window cleaning. And then I just went whenever I wanted. I'd work like half days. 3/4 of the day I would go to commercial areas and go literally door-to-door sales right through like Montreal and ask if people wanted
$5 to clean their windows or something, or maybe
and I would count the windows as I was walking from door to door and then go in and say, hey, like you have this many windows, I'll wash them all for $5, $10, whatever it was pretty cheap.
How do you say squeegee in French?
I actually just said squeegee, to be honest. My
universal, isn't
my
it?
company name was Squeegee Vitre Clean. So vitre was the window, play on speed.
Sure.
So that's what I did. And like you learn a ton about sales.
Yeah.
People really don't normally want to say yes. But then every once in a while there's that one person who would actually look at the windows and go, oh yeah, those are bad. Okay. It's worth it for
It needs to be done.
Yeah, I got to tell you a super quick story just because it relates to that. So I knew a guy back when I was probably a little bit older. I was probably like second year university or something. And once again, like...
So 37?
Yeah. Well, needed to make some extra money and do some other things. But I met a guy who used to own a Subway store, like an actual franchise, and was not making enough money after all his franchise fees. So he sold his Subway franchise and started a window cleaning business instead. And he was doing all the Tim Hortons restaurants around Hamilton and stuff. Not all, but many of them. And he had too much work. So he brought me on and we would do, I don't know, we'd make maybe $30 an hour or something washing windows for Tim Hortons stores and the odd, variety store and different things like that. But it astounded me that he was making more money with a squeegee and a bucket and a brush, than he was as the owner of a Subway franchise.
That's awesome.
So
for sure.
Yeah.
Stephanie, any window cleaning stories in your background? Because I got nothing.
No,
I don't know that I've ever cleaned
not.
a window
No.
with a
I
squeegee.
can't relate.
Oh,
No.
too
I
bad.
can't compete with these boys.
It was fun for a while when the weather's nice, and if you can do it on your own time, even better, right?
Well, that's it, right? When the weather wasn't nice, it was like, oh, a day off. Okay,
Yeah.
what do I do today?
Yeah.
Right?
World of
sure.
Warcraft.
So that was your first, and what other business did you do?
Then I started a custom soap company. So my girlfriend is really into arts.
Okay.
She made some for Christmas gifts, really enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, well, if you really like it, I'll help you. We'll start a company.
Yep.
I
It's
learned
a
a lot
natural
about
pivot from cleaning windows
Yeah,
to
sure.
focusing on soap.
Keeping
Yeah.
things clean, yeah.
I learned a lot about picking co-founders and people that, like, when they say, and we're still together, we get along great. And it wasn't that was an issue, but it's not everybody's an entrepreneur, even if they say they want to be an entrepreneur or try
Right.
it.
Yes.
It wasn't going to work.
Sure.
And I didn't know enough about the product. I couldn't really get my hands dirty with the product because I didn't.
Get your hands
Very
dirty.
funny.
Yeah.
I expect those jokes to come from Steve.
Yeah, that's right.
That was good, yeah.
Was it a fatherism? Is that what you said?
Fatherisms.
The
Yeah.
dadisms, the cheesy jokes, yeah.
Yeah, you're not a dad, are you?
I'm not. No,
Yeah.
not at all.
You're in good training, though, for when you do. Anyway, that's cool. So, so you're making soap, but I know we're on a tangent here. We're talking about the soap and the window cleaning, but I do find it, like any entrepreneurial enterprise, fascinating. So
You learn tons. Even people that you really get along with well,
Sure.
you need to have very specific differences that make for that constructive environment, right?
Right. You have to complement one another's skills and abilities and temperaments, I think, right? Rather than have just multiple clones of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you need to really love and believe in what you're doing. So with soap, eventually I was like, all right, like we have no competitive advantage. I don't really know how to do anything with this, right?
Sure.
So clearly understanding your competitive advantage and what you're doing matters. And those are all things that have come into Grobo, as now we know, like, this is exactly what we're doing, and this is why we're going to be the leaders in this industry.
Sure. As soon as you talked about making soap, all I could think about was that
Fight
movie
Club.
Fight Club, right? Tyler Durden, and they're stealing the fat from the liposuction factory.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm sure it was nothing like that when you were doing.
No, not quite.
So I want to hear more about the story of how you got from the beginning to now, but I was just thinking too, as far as the product goes. So you've described a little bit about your prototypes, and we've heard a bit about what the current product is. This requires power. This requires water. So is it something where I'm running like a hose from my kitchen sink into this thing, as well as an extension cord into the wall, or how does it get all hooked up?
So a lot of people ask that, actually.
Yeah.
Because people generally, if you had it outside, you would definitely plug in and just leave it plugged in.
Sure.
Inside, most people don't have a faucet or a tap that they could hook up to. So we haven't built that in. But what we have done is we've built in a system that actually has a bit of a slope to it.
Okay.
And a hole. So if you have a water glass, whatever you're watering with, even if you spill, all the water is going into our reservoir.
Right.
So we've designed it to be totally user-friendly.
So you just fill up the reservoir once a week or something, and
It'll tell you. That's the
it'll
best
tell you.
part. Yeah. So you'll get a
Okay.
push notification or an email, and it'll actually tell you, hey, you need to fill up the water reservoir. It's starting to run low.
Sure. I'm getting thirsty.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be something like that.
Sure.
And it'll sort of depend on how many of these pods you connect, right? So if you're trying to feed one pod versus 5 pods, you're going to have to probably fill it up 5 times as quickly.
Sure. Yeah.
We also have the ability to water more the longer the plant's been growing.
Right.
Okay.
So a tomato plant, the seed is not going to go
Doesn't
through
so much.
nearly as much water,
Yeah.
right? And so we can adjust that through all of our algorithms. And that's when it gets really fun, because it's not like we're flooding your product at first and then we're starving it when it's full grown. We can always kind of adjust and accommodate for that.
Interesting.
So when you're going through developing this system, there's so many different systems, aeroponics and deep water culture, and how did you decide to go with a soil system as opposed to
Hydroponic or something else?
strictly
Yeah.
water? Yeah.
Yeah, hydroponics is what a lot of our competitors use right now.
Right.
A couple reasons, I guess. The first thing is you can transplant soil, but I think actually the bigger thing is people understand soil.
Yeah.
The whole movement is towards natural food again, I guess, right? We've already been having so many additives. So now if you're going to tell me we're doing hydroponics, which can work great, especially if you're doing mass manufacturing of lettuce or one thing and you can control it and you know what you're doing.
Right.
If you aren't in that very, very controlled environment, you're very limited to what you can plant. So we can actually grow carrots. We can grow any seeds you want easily because it's natural. It's soil.
Yeah.
You can transplant them if you want. So if they get too big, we have some interest. I personally would even use it to start my seeds for when I transplant them outside. Right. So a month or 2 months beforehand, I can do that and get an earlier harvest.
Yeah.
For those 3 weeks of summer that we have here in Canada.
And that's why you need to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, I get these buckets of tomatoes. I had so many. I had probably literally 3 full buckets of tomatoes that were still green at the end of last summer because they didn't have enough time to ripen.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we went soil. I guess the biggest thing is people understand it. It's a lot easier to control. It has more of a buffer.
Yeah.
So hydroponics, you can think like you're injecting the nutrients into the plant.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus soil, the nutrients, or the plant takes the nutrients that it needs.
So it's interesting as you talk about sort of supersizing the red versus the blue light, that you don't go all the way down the science chain to every single advantage, that you've stopped at soil and said, hey, here's a decision to stop here because of the versatility and some of the transplantability and stuff. So that's interesting. That I like that decision.
I can see it as an easier sell to the customer too, because my wife is actually quite interested in your product. We were talking about it earlier, because we live in a basement apartment and we get very little natural light, and she loves the idea of growing things in a garden, but we have no garden. Telling her, here's a box that you put soil in and you put in your seeds and it takes care of things for you, makes a lot more sense than let's invest in a hydroponic system. Suddenly, whoa, that sounds freaky and too scientific for me, kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
for sure. And our goal is that whole experience, right? So we're actually going to ship you seeds, and we're going to ship the perfect amount of soil.
Right.
So all you do, you don't even have, half a bag of soil sitting in your closet for 6 months till you change it. You just cut open this bag, dump it in. We know what soil it is. You know that it's going to work.
Yeah.
If your plants start having trouble, chances are they've run out of nutrients. You change the soil, you transplant it. It's a pretty easy thing, right? You're not trying to add a little bit of like product A or product B or product C, figure out which one it is.
Right.
And so, so that's totally the goal behind it.
No, makes a lot of sense. So you've talked to us about the initial conception of the idea up to where we've met your co-founder and yourself have decided to get together and make this thing. So how long ago is this now? A year ago we're talking or more?
Close to a year ago. I didn't meet Chris until August of last year, maybe.
Oh,
so
okay.
I started this totally alone for the first 3 and a bit months. Well, even before that, when I was doing sort of the 2 foot by 4 foot, that's
you were already
an
messing around in the
easy,
space.
year and a half
Okay.
away, but full time. I was going full time for about 3 months before I met him, and I knew that I needed somebody.
Yeah.
It was just waiting until you find that right person.
So first of all, had you not, you guys weren't, childhood friends or something? You met after you had started this already?
Yeah.
And how did you meet your co-founder? Because I think a lot of people who are entrepreneurs are like, I'm looking for that perfect co-founder. How do I find them?
So
how did that happen for you?
So I met him in probably one of the coolest business courses that Waterloo runs. It's called Bet 300, and everybody who's in it has to have a business.
Right.
It can be at a different stage, but you have to have a business, and you get accepted into the class.
Now, is this the one where, like, on the first day you have to stand up and pitch, and that's your thing you work on for the course, for the rest of the course?
They do some of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
we interviewed another guest who I think took the same course and was describing something similar.
Rachel Bartholomew?
Yes, that's right.
She's a community TA. That's how I met her. She's involved with them too.
Sure.
And anyways, so I met him, and so he loves LEDs. Like, he built, some people listening might have seen it, a Daft Punk Guy Manuel helmet, I guess, with close to 800 LEDs in it, custom firmware, designed and like 3D printed the thing. So what he was trying to do is he was actually going to start building designer furniture with LEDs embedded in them.
Neat.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm trying to build a designer product. We've got LEDs. You like electronics. He also loves growing bonsai trees.
Okay.
There's little ones there. And so we got to talking one day, and it was like, let's do this.
Natural fit.
Yeah, it was a natural fit.
Wow.
Since then, I've discovered even more things that are natural fits. So, like, he's very detail-oriented.
Sure.
I'm overview-oriented.
Right.
And so together, we make sure we kind of cover the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
So that happened, and then going forward from there, we were in VFF shortly after that. We managed to win VFF. Then we moved into the Velocity Foundry when it opened up, and then we've just been plugging away at product development ever since. It's a long process with a connected thing, and then with gardening. You can imagine any trial we do takes a month to 2 months for us to actually see any results.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's a very unique kind of intersection of kind of required knowledge base, right? So you need the gardening knowledge, all the biological and maybe kind of chemical interactions going on there. You need the hardware knowledge. You need the internet and the connectivity and the app design knowledge. I mean, you guys are kind of fighting battles on multiple fronts and getting this developed, right?
We've learned a lot.
No, that's awesome.
There's still a lot we don't know.
It overwhelming for someone like me who's lacking in many of those skills, I guess. But luckily, it sounds like you guys have a lot of that covered, which is great.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing it one step at a time. We have like amazing mentors and advisors who have helped us through as well.
Sure.
So horticulture, for example, I know a bit, but we have a horticulturalist who runs an apple farm, who's our advisor. We have a person who runs the greenhouse on Waterloo campus for 20 years, who's our advisor. Wow. And you talk to these people and they're like, okay, do this, do this, do this. Like, they've done so many experience. They have so much knowledge that helps us, right?
Sure.
It would take us months to find any of that information out.
Right.
And they're going, okay, these are some of the best seeds that you should plant. These are the best seed distributors. These are the best, this and this. So
Yep.
Wow.
That's awesome to have a team.
That's
like
what
that.
really helps. Yeah.
And so how big is the team now?
Right now we are 5 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so yourself and Chris are covering most of the tech side, or?
Yeah, we actually have 2 co-op students right now who are helping out mainly with a lot of the mechanical design. So
Okay.
there's a lot of work that goes into making something that you can manufacture. Like
Yeah, I saw a water pump
Easy.
being designed there this morning.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really easy to design something on screen, and then you have to step back and go, okay, like how do we fit these parts together? How do you make these parts with a mold, right?
Sure.
Do you even use injection molding? What process do you use? And so that's why we're spending a lot of time on that right now to try to shorten our timeline once we actually send it to a supplier and say, hey, can you give us a quote?
Right.
Then they don't come back and say, well, actually, you have to rebuild this from the bottom up because you can't manufacture any of these parts.
Right.
Which is totally possible in mechanical design.
I had a
makes
question
sense.
just come in via Twitter. It hadn't even occurred to me, but when you look at sort of growing things, there's a pretty big movement down in Colorado and across Canada now. Are people able to grow medicine in the Grobo? If I can be as
Or
gently throwing that at you as possible.
Yeah.
Ingredients.
Yeah, can we grow pot in these things?
I've heard that medicine, as you call it, grows pretty similarly to tomatoes.
Right.
And we're having a lot of success with tomatoes right now. So
You seem to be very successful in your own tomato growth experience.
yeah,
14
exactly.
extra
You're
barrels.
thinking of branching out into other things.
That was not as good as his earlier pun.
I'm a dad.
It was okay.
I'm allowed to
It was
make
all
a
right.
cheesy joke too.
I give it a
about
B
that.
plus.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
So yeah,
Anyway,
we've had lots of interest. That's generally the first question that people ask us
Is it
about.
really?
Right. I apologize.
Yeah.
It took us so long to get there.
Yeah. so-
You got there. That's the key.
That's what's important, eh? Oh, geez. Okay, so we've heard how you got to where you are today, and so where are you today in this entire process? It sounds like you're still designing some of the hardware aspects of it.
When can we order one?
Yeah, when is this going to be on the market, and what's the plan for kind of moving from where you are now to getting it into people's hands at some point?
So it'll actually only be on the market next year. So
Okay.
we were going to launch a crowdfunding campaign in about a month from now.
Okay,
And then decided to change that and push it off until we're much closer to shipping.
gotcha.
The problem we're seeing right now is Kickstarter, a lot of the campaigns take way too long to deliver. There are all kinds, and it's not the campaign or the company's faults normally. Like things
Yeah.
come up as you try to do it, right?
Yeah.
I understand that there are delays, and I know we'll hit them as well. And so we started to think what we can really compete on is customer experience. From the time you get our box to until you walk through the whole process, right? That's where we think we can win the market. And if we start off by telling you, hey, wait, buy now, wait 2 years, people aren't going to be super pleased.
Right.
So we're pushing it off for a year. Next spring, we'll probably launch our crowdfunding campaign.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there and hopefully ship within a year after that.
And then
Okay.
any idea of your price points yet for a module, or is it a little too early to tell what we're going to be bringing?
We have an idea. We're playing with it a little bit because as the designs change, we can get a little bit cheaper. Then it becomes a little more expensive. To give you a range, it will probably be about $200 for the starter kit. So that's the main control pod that has your water reservoir and then one grow pod, soil, seeds, and a light.
So that would
Right.
be a 16 by 8 footprint?
That's exactly what it would be. Then if you want to add on, it's going to be like $80 to $90 to get an extra pod with a light. If you have a beautiful space and you don't need the light, that's great. And then it's probably $40 to $50 for that pod. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that seems fairly reasonable. I think, especially if somebody wanted to set up their own greenhouse inside their house, it's probably much cheaper and less hassle, right? So
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And I guess one of our biggest problems right now is that there's so much technology packed inside it, but I
Right.
think we've done a pretty good job at hiding it. That you don't really notice it's there, and so you don't feel like you're paying for the tech, right? So it's
Right.
not like you look at an iPhone and you're like, I know exactly what's in here.
right.
You look at these pods and you go, okay, well, that's a really nice, designer piece. It's a planter, and you don't realize everything that it's actually doing for you,
Right.
right?
You
Until
just
you
talked
start
to the
to
fridge
use
a
it.
couple
So-
minutes ago.
Well, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Yeah, I know my wife will be watching quite closely, and I'll be not that I'm not interested necessarily myself, but I'm happy to see what she can produce using a system like this.
Got to get her on our newsletter.
Yeah, okay. We'll get signed up right after I go home.
There you go.
After recording the podcast. Perfect. So now we have a good view of what's coming up in the future. we'll before we wrap up, I guess we can ask where we can find you guys online. You mentioned signing up for your newsletter and your website, but before we do that, let's do the lightning round. We should at some point get like an actual sound effect.
You didn't hear that?
I thought
Very
that was
dark outside
great.
right now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of scared a
man.
little bit.
We extract every ounce of value from our limited budget here. I think
That's
great.
correct.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the lightning round, we're going to throw 10 questions at you. You don't necessarily have to answer them super quickly, but they're short answers. So
See what we can do.
we'll see what you do with it. Did you listen to a previous podcast? Have you heard these before? Maybe you're already prepared.
I don't know if you're changing them. I did not write anything down or prepare
Okay.
them. It's just
Okay.
the bonus question that I like, but that'll be a
This
later
is the
one.
danger. As we get more popular, we can't surprise people with the questions anymore.
Yeah, we got big
Yeah.
plans for that, right?
Yeah, we'll
we
switch them
we
up.
got something.
All right, here we go. Give one piece of advice for new startups in 5 words or less.
This one actually I do remember.
Okay.
Do what you love.
Do
Or
what you love. Yep, that works.
the other way around would be love what you do. I think they're both equivalent.
Yep,
I look forward to working every day.
awesome.
And I know that I'm much happier than some of my friends that are on like actual co-op terms right now.
Right.
So make sure that's fine. I'm not being paid at the moment, but I'm
you
happy.
love it, awesome.
You love it, and that's
Yeah.
worth it.
Perfect. Number 2, how many hours do you work each day on average?
Probably 10-ish. 10. It's hard. I'm constantly working.
Okay.
My laptop's always with me, whether it's Grobo or something else. I'm always working on things. So
Okay.
probably 10 to 12. I don't normally stop working too much.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Number 3, who is your ideal investor? Do you have any investors yet, by the way?
We do not.
Oh, okay.
That'll be coming up in a little bit.
So who would that ideally be? Who would you want throwing money at you?
I don't.
Podcast host.
Yeah, exactly.
We have no money. That's not going to work.
All of the listeners today. No, yeah, I don't really have a particular name. I think it would be somebody that is willing to be a more active investor. They don't necessarily need to be in the space, but they need to be in one of our spaces.
Right.
So ideally, I think we would build an investor team that would complement each other. So if we had somebody in the green space and somebody who might just be in software, right?
Yeah.
Apps and whatever else, that also helps us.
Sure.
So they don't just have to be clean tech or green tech or
Yeah.
a specific category.
Perfect. Okay. Sounds good. Number 4, what is one startup skill that you feel you need to get better at?
Probably sweating the details at this point.
Okay. You're good with the big picture, but you need to get into the nitty gritty more.
Yeah, exactly. Chris doesn't always review everything because you can't always do that, right? So sometimes just taking that extra second could certainly help, and that's not just startup. That's overall as a student as well.
Life.
All that, yeah, it's helpful.
Sure. All right. Number 5, what's one startup skill that you considered yourself to have mastered?
Organization and planning. That's something that I
Big
absolutely, big picture. I love it. I love when things are organized. Looking at timelines for the company, the finances, like just knowing where things are and having a plan to go forward, so we're never, caught off guard, which could still happen for sure. You never really know what's coming, but it helps.
Yeah. I've incidentally, just along those lines, I think you're the only guest I've seen who's brought in a notebook and written down a few things as we've been talking. I mean, that's very well organized of you.
There you go.
I
It's
can
more organized than
vouch
I
for
am.
his organization. He's everything clean cut and everything planned. He bought a label maker the other day so he could label the little containers on our.
I couldn't take the
Yeah.
handwriting on tape anymore. It was like, no.
Well, that's awesome. Once you buy the label maker, you've graduated to a master of organization, I think.
Yeah.
That's
There you
perfect.
go.
Okay, question number 6. Mac, PC, or Linux?
Mac, 100%
All right.
for everything.
You got your Mac right beside you. I should have guessed.
Yeah, always.
Number 7, closely related, Android or iPhone?
iPhone.
Yeah? All right.
They work together. Like
Yeah.
I
They do,
don't think
oddly
that.
enough.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Androids are bad phones, but as long as I have a Mac computer, I would have an iPhone generally just because it works.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're playing an Apple sandbox, you might as well play with all the toys.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
And just as a quick aside, I dropped mine the other day, so I bought a screwdriver and I actually opened my iPhone 5C yesterday. It was terrifying.
Really?
But it still works today.
Oh, as long as it
So
works.
success.
Speaking of terrifying, number 8 is fill in the blank. I'm secretly terrified of.
Oh.
Opening my iPhone.
It doesn't have to
with
be
a screwdriver.
startup related necessarily, but it could be. Yeah.
Snakes in the garden.
Yeah, probably forgetting a really important piece of information and just like not knowing. So I don't have the best memory. It's something I'm trying to work on as well. So just like being in a situation where you meet somebody that you should know and have no clue who they are, or it would be something like that.
That happens to me all the time, actually. I feel terrible, especially with past guests. And I'm like, I know you from somewhere. Yeah, we sat in the same room for an hour in your podcast. Oh,
You can work it out for most people, but like being in some situation with somebody, famous or super important or whatever that like
Yeah.
you need to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Kind of like having a blind spot.
Yes.
It would be terrifying for you.
Yeah,
Fair
exactly.
enough. Number 9, fill in the blank. If I could have any drink in my hand right now, it would be. I see you have some water, but maybe there's a more ideal option. I don't know.
There is a more ideal option. Probably a banana avocado smoothie. Been having those recently, and they're actually really, really tasty.
Wow. I think you and my wife would get along really well. She really loves smoothies and avocados and what
It's
you're
really all it
developing
takes,
as
right?
your products, right?
Yeah. Well,
Interesting.
I literally spent like 10 minutes probably in the drink aisle the other day too, trying to find a decent drink that's not water.
Yeah.
In terms of sugar content and
Yeah,
stuff.
and there's nothing.
There's nothing.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
So it's your water or your smoothies
Or your soda.
something that's a little different. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Question number 10. What is your first purchase you're going to make after your company is bought out by Google? Or some other big relevant company?
No, Google would be cool. I
All
wouldn't
right.
complain because I think they own Nest, so that could all be
Yeah,
a nice
nice
package.
yeah.
Probably another rental property or two.
Okay.
I really enjoy real estate and spending the time. I'm on my computer so often that when I can go do some handiwork somewhere,
Yeah.
then that's a nice way to get away. So yeah,
very
like a fixer-upper
practical.
somewhere.
Very practical and responsible of you.
I think it's fun. Right?
Yeah.
Like you learn something new and probably tear down some walls too. That would be a good time. So
Absolutely.
What about you, Stephanie? Grobo was bought out by Google, and you get your shares are cashed in. You have $10 million to spend. What are you buying?
I can't say my answer is anywhere nearly as practical as Bjorn's.
Uh-huh.
I have this. I really like llamas.
Okay.
I would probably buy a llama farm somewhere in
Wow.
Peru or Ecuador.
I've heard that llama farms can be very profitable, actually. Like
Yeah,
the llama wool, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Llama wool is really warm, and they sell for a lot.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So we could see potential new rental property and llama farms in the
Yeah, you guys
future.
should work
it's still
together.
real estate. Right?
Yeah,
it's still
real estate.
practical.
That's true.
I think my favorite answer to that question so far, somebody said that they would buy Google.
Yeah.
After Google bought them, they would turn around and buy
I
Google
don't know
back.
if the money
Yeah, it might
works
be a little
like
hard.
that.
That's not allowed.
Yeah, that's not going to work. Okay, and the bonus question is toilet paper, fold or scrunch?
Based on how organized I am, we're gonna say that it's fold.
Yeah.
Scrunch is a little chaotic.
Do you want to provide us with an answer too, Stephanie?
Probably fold as well. It's hard when it's scrunched.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Could you guys go, just for me, just scrunch today? Just like go outside of the box. I know it's going to be, you're going to have to wash your hands afterwards and everything, but just scrunch and just see what happens. See what it feels like.
Try to get your hands dirty trying something new.
I
Thank you,
scrunch
Darren.
when
See, that was much better than the earlier one.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah.
I say scrunch when it's like one ply or really cheap toilet paper, and then you have to scrunch it.
Right.
Ah, okay.
It's hard to fold it.
Depending on the quality of toilet paper. I hadn't
Yeah,
considered
depending on where
that.
you are. Right?
Yes,
So you
fair
might
enough.
scrunch at Communitech, fold at home.
Right.
Okay.
It's all about the context.
We really need a better bonus question.
I'm telling you, man, I'm collecting research. I'm going to publish my findings on this.
We're going
at
back
some
to the
point in
fart
future.
smelling app, aren't we?
One day, if it's possible. Well, I think on that note, we should wrap things up here. Maybe you could just tell us where we can find Grobo online, or
Sign up for the
How
newsletter.
can we follow what's going on with you guys?
Yes, it's pretty simple. Just go to www.grobo.ca,
Okay.
and you'll find us there.
Perfect.
And then any sort of social media, it's /Grobo Inc.
Okay,
Yeah.
Grobo
That's
Inc.
Grobo.
Yes, exactly.
So Twitter, Grobo Inc. We can find you on Twitter
Yes,
there.
same
or-
with Facebook.
Okay.
And then, and website is grobo.ca.
And we can sign up for your newsletter on the website too?
Yes.
Perfect. So we'll put links to all that stuff when we post the podcast. Make it easy to find you guys. That'd be great. All right. Well, let's do our thank yous. So first of all, thank you to both of you, Bjorn and Stefanie from Grobo, for joining us today.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
I'd also
fun.
like to thank the Academy.
Our pleasure. Yeah. The Academy Awards happened recently. We ourselves did not win anything. There's no Tech Startup Podcast Award yet, but
No.
in the future maybe.
We're hoping to get an Olympic spot, though.
Yeah,
Maybe they could have
one
us
of
in
these
the
days.
Olympics.
We should throw a thank you out to the Velocity Foundry for letting us use their wonderful furnace room once again for recording here today. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us on another episode of TSP Weekly. Please feel free to send us your comments, your questions, your criticism, and your feedback. Our email address is feedback@tspweekly.com, or you can leave a comment on our website, which is tspweekly.com. So, from myself, Darren Conley, from my co-host Stephen Campbell, and our guests Bjorn Dawson and Stefanie Chan from Grobo, thank you very much for joining us here today, and we'll see you all again next week.
Have a great week.